Can I have some of your biscuits, please? Oh, no. Carry on then.
Right, so we're now live, so I think make that 1/2 as well.
Okay. Right, welcome everybody. It seems a long time since our last meeting, which apparently was in February. So yeah, it's good to see everybody. So apologies. We've got any apologies?
We have apologies from councillors Jezard and Toll.
Any other apologies? Declarations of interest? No. Minutes of the last meeting. So just going through. In terms of there weren't any written question responses from cabinet. Review of Paddling Pool's final report. There was an action on there that said the committee agreed that health and safety work should be prioritised. Councillor Charles requested the timeline along with detailed costs.
Sorry, Chair, can we just confirm how you want people to request to speak? Is it just physically raising their hand?
Yes, if they wouldn't mind, that would be, I can see most of them. Simon's there, yeah, and David. Okay, so, right, I'll just finish on that, on the point that I was going to raise, and then I'll go with you, Simon. Is that okay? So I requested that wonder what had happened to the timeline, and also what was happening as far as the detailed costs are concerned. My understanding is that as yet there is no timeline, but that's being chased up. My understanding is that as far as the detailed breakdown of the costs are concerned, that they are awaiting the that will come from the process of the tender. Is that's my understanding from officers. Simon.
Sorry, Chair. It's more matters arising. I don't want to skip over that. But I can wait until you've agreed the minutes. Then.
My apologies. In which case, I've gone slightly out of sync. Yes. Can we agree the minutes? That's the first instant. The first. Great. Agreed. Matters arising, and I'm now picking up as a matter arising, and I've got Joel. Yeah. Joel.
Are you ready?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify, we had a scrutiny committee in February where we agreed in the minutes that we would have a timeline and a breakdown of costs. I'm not satisfied with the answer that's been provided. I think that we should have a timeline and we should have costs by now. We're now in the middle of summer. I appreciate that we've gone through unprecedented times, but the work on the paddling pools was well on track and in line with the council's timelines for actually getting out there and consulting with people about the priorities for the paddling pools. So I'm disappointed. I want to understand why the instruction that we all gave and agreed on to officers was not carried out, and perhaps Simon Hill could confirm what's gone on there.
With your permission, Chair.
Yeah.
I don't know in relation to the timelines. What I can say, Chair, if the committee are requesting an update of that, I can take it back to the officer and provide a written circulation to the committee after the meeting.
Thank you. Simon, you had your hand up.
I did indeed. Item 44, work plan.
Yeah.
A couple of issues. The main thing is it's not on the agenda. Now, the work plan is a standing item. And as I understand it, there was a call round for issues 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, which were all duly submitted. There's also 1 or 2 issues hanging over from February, which have not been addressed. And I don't understand why it's not on the agenda.
Right. My understanding was that in terms of the work plan, that the work plan was going to be considered at the next meeting, and that's the reason why it's not on the agenda for now. In terms of it being a standing, whether it should have been on because it's a standing. If it's a standing, if it's a standing, what's the word?
Standing item.
Standing item, Chair.
If it is a standing item, then I can only apologise. That's my ignorance, and I should have picked up on that. So
I can come back. There are items running forward. But the previous constitution said, there will always be a work plan which will be decided at the start of the year. We're now into July. At the moment, there is nothing happening. So we're going to be halfway into the year before proposals and ideas go down, and it's going to be well into the next municipal year before these issues are actually resolved. If you look at the later item on the agenda, which is the sort of new constitution for this committee, it actually says at the first meeting it will be establishing the work plan. Now, the new constitution hasn't been formally adopted yet, but obviously it will have a great bearing on this meeting. It went to cabinet last week. There weren't any amendments to it, and it should be there. The ideas were presented to you. The new protocol says yes, they will go to SMB, who may need to sort of focus on 1 or 2 items. But the ideas have gone in and they disappeared, and we can't discuss the work plan tonight because it's not on the agenda. I don't understand why this meeting is so different from all the others.
Well, it certainly wasn't. Certainly that wasn't intentional. My understanding, though, is that what we're doing was that we were looking at the report. We went slightly out of sequence in the sense that the report should have come back to this committee first before it went on to cabinet. Because of the issues of the COVID, etc., things got out of sequence. So it then went to cabinet, and it's now coming back here. Effectively, I mean, it's been adopted by cabinet, or rather, cabinet have seen it and agreed it, etc. But it's now coming back here, and then the intention was that effectively the next meeting would be, as it were, the first one where the work plan would be considered.
I'm sorry, Chair. There is an existing procedure for scrutiny committee which can keep us going until it's changed. The recommendation that went to cabinet last week actually came from scrutiny, so we're hardly likely to undo it now. It went to cabinet on the basis that it is for voting and for approval next week, but it's not actually in place until we formally approve it. So we're working on the existing rules. You can't suddenly change horses in mid race. I mean, what happened to the ideas that you and David put forward?
Yes, and what I was going to be suggesting was that they would all come. I was going to go a little bit later after we've gone through the next item on the agenda, which was the review of the review of overview scrutiny in the final report. Once we'd done that, what I was then going to go and do was to effectively go through the headings in terms of the work plan with some suggestions at that point. Now, I can either deal with that now, or we can deal with it as and when we've gone through we've gone through the next item on the agenda. There's certainly no attempt to, in any way.
With respect, there is, because it's not on the agenda.
Well, there's nothing I can do about that.
Yes, there is, Chair, because you are the chair.
Chair, with your permission, I just wanted to sort of, I think Councillor Charles actually wants to speak. I'll defer to the member.
Joel?
Under matters arising, Chair, can I ask if you can make strong representations to the senior officers of this council who have not, under the previous minutes, conformed to the wishes of this committee to deal with certain standing items that are months and months outstanding? It's not good enough. Does this council take scrutiny seriously? Do the officers take scrutiny seriously? I'm very concerned that they don't, because they haven't abided by the wishes of this committee. So, Chair, if I was you, echoing what Councillor Carter has said, I would make strong representations to officers to explain why basic requests have not been fulfilled. Furthermore to that, there is a basic process issue that has just been neglected, and that is the work plan. We need to discuss the work plan, and I understand what you have said, it's coming in later, but we're currently under the existing rules. We haven't changed the new protocol. So I'm sorry, this is not a very good start.
Well, what I would say is that I've made every attempt so far to engage with both members of your party through the good offices of David. We have had certainly David and I have had discussions about the ideas that have come from this committee and how we were going to progress them. In terms of, David was fully aware, as I was aware, that we wouldn't be necessary, that the work plan as such wasn't on the agenda here, and that the agreement, and that the work plan will be being agreed at the next meeting. So I am slightly taken aback by the approach that's being taken. I have apologised in terms of if the work plan wasn't on the agenda and it should have been a standing item, then please accept my apology for that.
Tony, I don't personally, I don't think you're to blame here, but I think you're the solution to the problem that we've got at the moment. And I think the officers need to explain very clearly why they're not dealing with deadlines in a timely manner and why they're not treating scrutiny with respect. And through the chair, you're able to exercise our concerns in a very forceful way. And I know that you'll be able to do that in a very capable way.
Thank you. Okay. Moving forward, if I may, what I'd like to do this evening, though, if it's acceptable. Sorry, Sam, can I just...
Sorry. There is another item on matters arising, which actually comes under the work plan, which says that it was agreed that a note on the review of permitted development will be circulated to committee members. This will be in place of a report due to be considered at the meeting in March 2020. Yeah. I don't recall seeing that note on permitted developments.
And I've already raised that item with the officers. So I'll come back to you on that one if I may, just a moment. Can I just go back to the work plan? What I would like to do as far as the work plan, if it's acceptable to members, is that we go, once we've dealt with the matters arising, the remaining matters arising, that we then go on, we move on then to the review of the overview and scrutiny in the final report there. Once we've finished that discussion, I'd then like to come back to a discussion about the items that are currently on the work plan, and I want to take some, because a number of items have been superseded by the events that are now around in terms of the COVID recovery panel and the various other stuff that's going on within the council and what have you. So what I would like to do at that point is then come back and have a discussion with you about some of the items that are on that agenda, and just take soundings from you as to the future direction of travel. Would that be acceptable?
No. It's within our gift and within the Constitution for us to set the work plan.
Yeah. Yes.
But we don't. But we've no idea at this point in time what those items might be, because they've not been circulated.
Hence my point, whereby I was sorry, Simon Hill. Excuse me, just a minute. I've got something up on my screen. I just want to get rid of it. Hence my point that in what I would like to do is you don't have it in front of you. I have the work plan with the titles and what have you up here. What I then wanted to do at the end, towards the end of the meeting, was for us to just go through them in terms of saying, well, this is what's currently on the work plan, etc., to sound out views as to some priorities as to which ones are now priorities in terms of importance to the committee. That in order that we can do the preparatory work ready for the next meeting. Simon Hill.
Yes, Chair. I just sort of by way of explanation, really, about why we are here without a work plan. Officers were ready to bring this review to your meeting in March. And if we had done that and approved it at the council meeting that would have been scheduled at that time, we would have been into the new process where at this meeting we would have had a properly formatted number of requests from officers that reflected the scope and the outcomes from those reviews. Now, obviously, you as a committee haven't approved that yet, and the required changes to the Constitution haven't been made by the council, and that's still waiting to be done. It was felt that the list of items that at the moment are merely headings cannot be really judged by the board about whether they are achievable against the backdrop of other work that the council is doing in relation to the pandemic and recovery until that was properly scoped out. So hence, really, Chair, the work plan couldn't come in a meaningful way to this committee tonight. What we do need, if the members approve the process in the later item, is that we will work together with those that put forward items, and they won't be lost, to bring them back to the subsequent meeting and follow the process that's outlined in the later report.
Anybody want to come in, Simon? Simon.
So the new constitution for scrutiny coming tonight was actually prepared by scrutiny, by a working group in scrutiny, to scrutiny.
Yeah.
It went to cabinet for noting or approval in draft.
Yeah.
And come back in. So I'm struggling as to see why there will be any assumption that scrutiny would not approve this this new constitution and thereby remove the proposed way of working forward. You know, we could still have the work. You know, on the basis, you know, an assumption could have been made that the constitution would be approved tonight, and therefore that could then release the items onto the work plan as per the schedule, actually, as per the protocol. You know, I'm sorry, I'm really struggling to understand why there is nothing here.
Right. Well, given we are where we are, the question now is what do we do about it in terms of going forward? I've suggested a way forward in terms of what I've suggested is that we look at we look again at the review of the overview and scrutiny. Once that's done, we then go back and we look at the headings for the scrutiny work plan. And I take your views then, and then with a view to at the next meeting there will be we will all agree the work plan going forward. That's what I'm suggesting.
But
Okay.
again, with respect, Chair, I haven't got the date of the next meeting in front of me.
The date of the next is Tuesday, the 1st of September.
The 1st of September.
Yeah.
So nothing's going to happen on scrutiny at all until September. Then we're going to sort of prioritise what's going to be done, and then the officers will then go away and prepare the background. You know, it's going to be January, February time before we even start getting work proposals. And I say we've lost almost a year when there are pressing issues that we need to be getting on with. Scrutiny, as is well laid out in both existing constitution and the future one, are to hold the council to account and to be a critical friend. Right. You know, and it's down to the members of the scrutiny committee to decide what it is they want to scrutinise.
Right. Well, I have suggested a way forward. I'm not prepared to have any more debate about it. In the sense, there is a potential way forward in terms of what I'm suggesting is we look at the review of the sorry, the review of overview and scrutiny report. Once that's done, we look at the headings, etc. And in terms of, I think, I mean, where I disagree with you, Simon, I think there is actually a fair bit of work yet to be done between now and September, in terms of the which is brought out in the review of the overview and scrutiny report, in terms of the approach that we're going to be taking to what members want in terms of going forward. So, for example, trying to be a bit smarter about what our approaches, etc., are going to be. So there's a fair bit of work that can go on between now and September, and we certainly I will give my assurance that that will happen. Bob.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think I share other members' frustration in this, because we made decisions in February about what we're going to do, and it seems that nothing's been done. I think you ought to make representation to the officers, say what's happened here, because this is a complete waste of a meeting tonight. And as Simon said, and we don't agree politically, but I think he's right, is that we're wasting loads of time. We're going to have to wait till September to get things moving again. And I think we need to get this moving, because it's unacceptable, to be honest. Thank you.
Okay. I'm more than happy to reflect the views of the committee, and to ensure that the views of that committee are minuted. Maggie? You're muted, Maggie.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. When we are going to consider the work plan we had previously, would we need to put the SMART formula into that now? Because after tonight's meeting, that will be kicking in. So will that work plan look different because the SMART system is now coming in, and we have to look at it in a different way?
Yeah.
And also the things that we wanted, that we gave the list of to you, we need to know if they're going to be under the SMART system as well, because we felt quite passionately about some of the things we were suggesting we worked on in the coming year. Thanks, Chair.
The answer to your question is yes, Maggie. Right. Can I move, before I move on, just picking up on the other point that Simon was making with regard to, sorry, excuse me, just one moment. There was a second item in terms of matters arising, Simon.
It was the note about permitted developments.
That's right. Simon Hill, do you want? I mean, I chased this up with the officers, and basically we were saying it was agreed that a note. What it says in the minutes was it was agreed that a note on the review of permitted development would be circulated to committee members. I know that a note hasn't been circulated to committee members, but I understand that in terms of this committee, that subsequently there were actions taken by cabinet, and as far as the officers are concerned, they felt that at that point that the matter had been dealt with by cabinet, and there was nothing further for this committee to do on that. Have I reflected that accurately, Simon Hill or Adam?
That's my understanding, Chair.
Yeah.
But with respect, we could have had a note back to say that's what the action was.
Yeah.
To actually, it was an ongoing item on our work plan. We expected something to happen. Something else happened.
Yes.
Which is, off the top of my head, I can't recall what it was, but that would have rounded it off and presumably finished it. But we're left hanging because we don't know.
Well, I can take that back to the officers.
I will be grateful, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, can I now move on to the review of the overview and scrutiny final report? And
sorry, with respect, Chair, there are items 5 and 6 and 7 to go yet.
Sorry, my apologies. Right, there are any written questions from the public? No, there aren't, that I'm aware of. Are there any written questions from councillors? No, there aren't, as far as I'm aware. the responses of the Cabinet to reports of Scrutiny Committee, other than the Cabinet looked at the review of the overview and scrutiny report, and that was that was accepted by Cabinet the other day. There's nothing else as far as I'm aware.
No, Chair.
Right. So item 8, review of overview and scrutiny final report. I hand over to Adam, or
If Councillor Charles has a question, I'm happy to.
sorry, Councillor Charles.
Are we doing questions first? Yep. Going into questions on the report.
I'm happy to go through questions first, yes.
Oh, did you want to set out some of
I think it would be useful.
yeah, if you want, Adam, if you want to set out the highlights as you would see it from the report, then feel free.
And then we then do questions, etc.
Okay, so I think it's important to remember there are 4 aims to the guidance which has caused this review. So that's providing critical friend challenge, amplifying the voices and concerns of the public, being led by independent people who take responsibility for their role, and driving improvement in public services. I think the work identified is a solid starting point with lots of effective scrutiny taking place. And there's a need to refine process and better reflect the guidance. In fact, I was approached by another council shortly before the review started, asking for information about what we did, because we were seen as somewhere which conducted good scrutiny. I think in terms of the 4 headings, in terms of critical friend challenge, this is mainly about providing constructive challenge to the Cabinet, external organisations and to the committee itself. And the Working Party identified a need to provide constructive challenge to Cabinet prior to decisions being made instead of after. And the Cabinet Scrutiny Protocol sets out the process for this to happen. And the protocol also sets out the expectations to enable a constructive dialogue. And then the procedures themselves have been amended to remove the expectation that the committee will focus on external matters only, so it can now focus on internal matters as well. And the protocol also strengthens the existing processes when scrutinising external organisations. In terms of driving improvement in public services, I think this is the primary goal of the committee and the council as a whole, and something councillors are passionate about. So the review has looked at ways in which we can make the process more outcome-led. So we've got the revised topic submission process, which means that smarter objectives are identified prior to a review starting. And then the work within that review is carried out in order to fulfil those objectives. Submitting topics in advance will also assist in developing a deliverable work plan, with reviews better aligning to the expectations of the committee. In terms of amplifying the voices and concerns of the public, councillors are very well aware of public concerns, so there isn't much work in that regard. So the focus was enabling you to address these. So that's achieved through the outcome focused work. And then finally, being led by independent people who take responsibility for the role. The need to interact with Cabinet whilst being independent is reflected within the protocol, and Cabinet can highlight areas of importance, but doesn't have the power to direct your work plan. And this is why the Cabinet's working group lacks this independence. And so we're recommending the name is changed to avoid that conflation between overview and that group. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Shona, and I've got Joel. Yeah, so if we do Shona first, Joel.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a quick question. It's nothing against the report, Adam, because you've obviously worked very, very hard on it, but how comes I've got loads of red lines through mine? It looks like I've got the draft, not the actual one. It's really hard for me to make a decision about whether I agree with this, whether I seem to have the draft, not the actual reality and the final one.
So those are the track changes from the existing documents. I'm sorry if those were confusing.
Yes, it looked like it was just literally just put all together, and no one has actually put a little message saying all the red are the changes we want to make. I looked at it and just went, if I got given that, I'd be really annoyed. So you're telling me that they're the changes we want to make, which is why they're in red.
Yes. So
thank you very much, Chair.
Joel?
Thank you, Chair. I have looked through the protocol and I've one observation that is in a form of a question. Clearly, the protocol is moving in line with government guidelines, and there is this mantra of being a critical friend in parts of the council, whether it be the work of cabinet and so on. It goes on in the report to say that what is really important from the outset going forward under these new protocols, that we need to marshal our work plan around common goals. What I wouldn't like to see is those common goals strangled so that members don't have the independence to raise issues of public interest in the town. So are these goals, is the intention to move us to, say, for example, the 5 corporate priorities the council has under those themes, and that we can only suggest items for scrutiny that are under the auspices of the council's corporate priorities? Because I wouldn't like to see that. I'd like us to have more independence and not to be locked into the council's own priorities, because there may be other matters that come up that are within the public interest and that we should be looking at them as scrutiny. So I'm just hoping that we've got that flexibility and scope to do that.
Yeah, you always have that flexibility. I think in terms of what you can set, there isn't a huge amount you can't look at. I mean, you couldn't look at, say, individual planning applications or something like that. I think the idea of having the corporate priorities on there is more to help frame the discussion, particularly when you're dealing with cabinet matters, rather than to say, oh, you can't look at that because it's not a corporate priority. But it's just a bit of guidance to push you and to assist in formulating a work plan, but it doesn't constrain you.
I'm grateful for that, Chair, as long as we are not restricted from looking at matters within the public interest and that are appropriate. I have no issue with guides as long as they're not requirements to follow a certain line that the council wants to restrict scrutiny to do, because at the heart of this protocol must be the independence of scrutiny to challenge constructively decisions that go on, not just at council, but external forces that have an impact on the council's future priorities. So that's helpful, Adam.
Anybody else want to come in? Maggie?
Thank you, Chair. If the Cabinet, when we send a report through to them, does not decide to accept our bearings, our the details that we put through, what do we then do about the decision that the Cabinet's made against us? Because if we're scrutinising, it would be difficult if the Cabinet blocked. That's a concern I've got. You know, we do the work, etc., and then the Cabinet looks at the recommendations on the committee and then decides not to accept it. Where would we go in that sort of situation?
I think, for you, Chair, I think there's a few things to unpick from that. I think the first is the emphasis on being constructive. So the aim would be to avoid that happening in the first instance. You've obviously got the option to call in decisions if you feel that they haven't followed processes accurately. We don't have that many call-ins here. I know a lot of councils that have a huge number. That is quite a blunt instrument in and of itself. And the options would be to refer back to the decision taker or to full council. You can always, the aim would really be around constructive dialogue rather than and then calling afterwards if it really there was an issue. But hopefully that you shouldn't get to that stage if you are constructive.
Right.
Equally within the within the document, it talks about being critical friend. It will equally recognise that it equally recognises that at times, although we will seek within the committee to come forward with, for want of a better word, a committee agreement, but it does recognise that within that there may well be times when we don't come forward with agreement, and there will be opportunities for there to be a, you know, for want of a better word, a minority report or a report to go in there. So there are processes. There are processes on that. Simon Hill.
Yes, well, Chair, just a couple of points there as well. On the protocol sets out that where you put something to the Cabinet, they have to consider it at their next meeting, and that where they don't adopt it, they're required to provide you with a written explanation about why they haven't. And also, I would say that officers are suggesting that for the first time that we actively monitor the tracking of the recommendations about whether they're implemented through the cabinet process, which is something that I don't think we've done up to now. So there is a bit more control about where your recommendations have gone and what's happened to them, greater than you currently have.
Right.
Right. We finished on the discussion on this document. Joel, yeah.
Chair, we've got a new set of protocols here before us for scrutiny, and I'm still left feeling very concerned about how the new scrutiny protocol is going to be actually implemented practically.
Yeah.
I'm concerned that we're losing some ability to challenge what portfolio holders in this council may do. What the council does is a policy decision, and that's one of the ambitions that scrutiny should always strive to achieve, and that is that focus on what policy decisions have been made by the council. Are they effective for our local residents? And that's just one aspect of what scrutiny must ensure that it delivers for its residents, and that must be paramount in our minds. And I fear that this protocol reduces our ammunition, in effect, to challenge those decisions in a critical way, but it's also measured in a constructive approach. I think previously, where we have worked through our work plan, we've faced serious roadblocks, and there could be other roadblocks coming down the line if Cabinet tries to flex its muscles and impinge on the independence of scrutiny. I'm concerned that if we make recommendations, they just get kicked into the long grass. And there's some concern for me in this protocol that we could fall into that trap. So there was a lot of concerns about this protocol. I hope that as an organisation within the council, we are a body within the council that we are able to flex our independence and without fear or favour, not just challenge what the council's doing, but bring in issues that externally impact the council. As I said in my question earlier, there are a range of issues that we're facing at the moment, notwithstanding the fact that we've just gone through a pandemic of the scale that generations of us have not witnessed before. And there will be questions about that as well, what the council did and didn't do. We need to be able to ask those probing questions so that we get to the bottom of those answers quickly for our residents. And that principle must be enshrined as a bedrock for what scrutiny does going forward. And I hope that that's not withered away by this new approach.
Anybody else? So I've got Simon Hill. Anybody else want to speak? Simon.
Chair, just to reflect what Councillor Charles has said, I don't see anything in this protocol that does anything but strengthen the ability of scrutiny to call members of the Cabinet into account. Obviously, it's here tonight for members to strengthen or suggest changes if they so wish, and we can take them back to the Cabinet if they wish to make changes. So if the members do want to suggest changes tonight, the officers are quite prepared to take them away and have a look at them.
I've got Bob.
Thank you, Chair. When we first discussed this new process, I was a bit concerned about it, that we would be stuck with only being able to discuss a few things. But I understand if members have got something that is critical to them and critical to the residents of the town, that we can raise it and discuss it and do something about it. So it's not going to be lost in this protocol document. That's my understanding. Thank you.
Sharon, do you want to come back in? No. Okay. Right. Now, the only other point I would just sort of bring to the committee is the use of the topic submission form. And basically, it's just reminding people that if as and when items are put forward for discussion by the committee, we want members to be thinking about what's the purpose of it. You know, why are we asking for it? Why is it going to be reviewed? And can they be put? Can those purposes and objectives be put out as smart objectives? Who the potential? What written evidence is required? Who potential witnesses are to give some thought about who potential stakeholders will be, and there's other things there about site visits, etc. So it's just about that form is just giving some guidance to people to members to think about when they're sort of putting forward submissions for this committee to be looking at, as it were. So our hope is that by the time we get to the point where we're saying, well, okay, this is, we're doing the scoping, we're doing whatever, we're very clear about what it is we're seeking to achieve. Joel, I've got, yeah.
I'm grateful for Simon Hill offering the opportunity for changes, and forgive me for not proposing this change sooner, but I wanted to test the committee's appetite on a recommendation, and it would need the officers' input because I don't know if it's within the guidelines that the council has been given by government. One of the mechanisms I was thinking about as I led towards this meeting last week was a mechanism by majority vote of all the members of this committee to fast track issues of concern and fast track the timelines for work to be completed. It would require some work offline about what we mean by fast track and how quickly we can get reports delivered. But I think a fast track mechanism for issues that are of majority concern of this committee should be given the provision of a fast track opportunity to be debated and actioned quickly. This is an opportunity in the protocol to inject that in, and I think it gives us more strength and authority to have that kind of mechanism. Do you understand what I'm saying, Chair?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if what you're saying is, supposing, I don't know, an item comes to the fore that which we as a committee feel needs to be dealt with, and we need to be dealt with. We're setting up. First off, we're setting up the agenda items for the rest of the year. Something may well come up, which we then want to actually consider and consider quickly. What you're saying is that isn't in any way inhibited by the previous timetabling, etc. Would that be right?
Just to clarify it for you, Chair, just so it's crystal clear, on top of that, what I'm suggesting is that we, to give this committee more teeth, also set up what we mean by fast track for the officers, setting deadlines for the officers who seem at the moment unable to keep the deadlines. I think we have to set a provision here for fast tracking with clear deadlines for dealing with these emergency matters. So they're rapid reports within a month. Maybe a working group will have to be drawn together across party of the scrutiny committee to deal with those issues. But I believe that provision should be in there. If you look at a worked example, the resurgence perhaps of county lines drug gangs in the town, if that was suddenly a serious issue, which I know it is at the moment, there are a range of things going on at the moment that you know full well, Chair, that we can't discuss in open forum. Scrutiny may want to immediately discuss with partners what's happening here. Why have we come to this situation? There may be other examples that come to the fore, and I think that we need to have provision to demand of the officers that they must fast track reports and bring them to scrutiny. And whether or not we have a working group during the course of that work, I think this is something we need to discuss offline with officers to insert it in. But I think it would add teeth to our committee to do that.
Okay. Simon Hill, I've got.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, it's for the committee to determine their work plan. I'm quite happy that members set officers stringent timescales for coming back, and there may be items that come before the committee that they want dealt with quickly. It's up to you to determine your work plan. I would say a word of caution. We do need to take account of the total capacity of your officer corps to deliver something or large to a timescale at the moment. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it needs to be a discussion in the round with the officers. There is always within your scrutiny rules a provision where a member can raise with the proper officer to raise something at the next meeting for general discussion. That has always been in your rules, it's not new. So if members want to bring something quickly to the following meeting, they can always exercise that right. That hasn't changed.
Just to cover that off, Chair, of course the officers aren't going to like this, but I think we have seen systematically a breakdown in officers on this committee keeping to deadlines. And so they have dug this hole for themselves, and we need to exercise teeth as a committee and set them deadlines that they need to follow. And I think that this is a mechanism of doing that. The officers aren't going to like this, and I recognise the time capacity at the moment, but that's not going to be the case for the long term. These protocols are a long-term protocol setting out our direction of travel for years to come. So I believe we need to have this discussion offline, but certainly put deadlines and fast tracking provision in here that's stronger than it currently is.
I'd be certainly willing. I mean, I think there's something in what you're saying, Joel, in terms of it being able to say we as a committee would require, responses on this within this and this and this timeline. However, I would also want that to be, if we're going to have some sort of protocol and what have you around that, then I'd want that to be agreed, because in terms of from outside of this debate that we're having now, but I want something to come back to the committee whereby one could say, well, okay, there may well be urgent issues that need to be addressed. What would be a reasonable timelines and whatever to address it, and it's understood that this is outside of, for want of a better word, the more normal processes of the council, as it were. We are seeing these as urgent items that need to be addressed, and this is the reasons why. And I'd want some protocol agreed with the chief exec, and obviously, going forward. Would that be I think that might well be a way forward on that one. Simon Carter, that is.
Thank you. If it might be helpful, I'm certainly happy to second Joel's proposal, but to avoid even more delay, that we agree this protocol subject to the amendment that Joel's put forward being reviewed and coming back to the next committee for approval.
Yeah. Okay.
So
agreed. I agree with that.
The decision has to be as put forward, plus the amendment as one item, so that we know it's going to be included and will be done in a timely fashion.
Simon Hill, and then
I think, Chair, it would be helpful to officers for Councillor Giles to outline to me whereabouts in the protocol he wants provisions added, so that we can be quite certain about where we need to do work if you're asking us to come back.
I'm delighted, Simon. And under the protocol, I thought you'd ask that question. Under the protocol, I would like inserted under drive improvement in public services a mechanism to fast track issues of concern that require. That's on page 8 of the protocol.
Chair, that's the report to committee, I believe.
Oh, sorry, I'm getting the pages mixed up. So under the scrutiny protocol, if you go to page, I'm just coming to it. It's under the scrutiny committee reviews.
Yeah.
So that's on page 14. Sorry, I lost my place.
Yes.
Scrutiny committee reviews. I think that section needs to be expanded to allow this fast track proposal that we're discussing.
And basically what you're saying is whether a majority of the committee.
Yeah.
I'm just going back over it. So whether the majority of committee could consider an item to be urgent. Yeah.
Yes.
That they will agree. What's the word?
Fast track process.
A fast track process.
Yeah.
So for that fast, and whereby it will enable them to set deadlines in terms of getting response. Getting response.
In line, I would say, in line with pre-agreed deadlines with officers, because I'm not saying that we should just set arbitrary deadlines without discussing that with the officers.
So we
Not
need
at all.
to agree. Yeah, yeah.
That's been pre-agreed.
So that then there needs to be some work being done, A, on that, and B, on what's reasonable in terms of, you know, in terms of officer response times. Yeah.
Sorry,
Oh,
Chair.
Simon.
I think the section on page 14 is about pre-scrutiny of cabinet matters. It's not around your work plan. I would suggest if you are going to have that mechanism, it needs to be added to either section 4 or probably added to the end of it, or something on the end of that. It doesn't fit well with section 5, which is about pre-decision scrutiny of cabinet matters.
You're right.
Yeah, I think Simon there does have a point. What I said earlier was that I felt it needed to be expanded because I recognised it was about cabinet members, but I felt that the heading Scrutiny Committee reviews lended itself to this kind of fast track. But I mean, we could come up with our own heading. Could have a fast track process and have that as a subheading in here. But I just felt that section 5.3 lended itself well to having it beefed up and inserted in that fast track. But we could create our own heading subject to the discussions with officers.
And what I think would be really helpful, Joe. Sorry, Bob, I'll come back to you in a moment. What I thought might be helpful though, Joel, is could you put something in writing at some point and ping it across to myself and to Simon, etc., in order that we can sort of look at it and, you know.
Well, we're agreeing the recommendation, aren't we now?
Yeah.
And I suspect there'll be a meeting offline about this. So the way you want to play it, just let's discuss it offline. But let's just get the recommendation sorted first.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy that if you want to approve it subject to further work being undertaken on it, and Councillor Joel can outline what he foresees to be what his requirement, we can bring it back to the committee at a later point.
Bob.
Yeah, I'm just worried about if we do this, has it got to go to cabinet again and delay us even more before we can actually take off? What actually stops us from making a decision at a scrutiny committee, if we're all in agreement, which I'm sure we would be, to get something done, and we insist that it's short tracked or whatever it's called, and get it done that way? Do we need to put this in the process? I'm not against it, but do we need to do that?
Just answering that, Chair, I think the key to this, I think Bob's raised an important point. The key to this is that we've got pre-agreed deadlines for fast tracking, which we don't currently have. And that's the ace in the hole for us, I think, as a scrutiny committee. Does that make sense?
Okay, and then I think also, Bob, in terms of, it's due to go back to council this week. I can't see that. I mean, I think picking up on the point that Simon Hill was making in terms of there may well need a little bit more work to be done in terms of what are reasonable timelines, etc., etc. In terms of the principle that Joel was making, I think we're all agreed. Would that be Simon? Bill? No. Simon?
Well, all I would say, Chair, is that we as officers don't see there's anything to constrain members setting challenging targets to officers to come back with reports, and I outlined that earlier. So I would say that I possibly agree with Councillor Davies that something like that isn't required. It's for you to determine your work plan and how quickly you do it. And officers will endeavour to meet that timeline, and if they can't, they will come back and explain themselves. But you know, if the members of the committee want to make that change, I would suggest you agree the protocol subject to that coming back. Whether it needs to go back through cabinet at some later juncture, we would have to look about what was being proposed.
Simon Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just sort of clarify that any further amendment we make to this protocol will have to go back to either cabinet or full council, or is there discretion to modify, tighten up, improve what's here already without going anywhere else?
Have I got Maggie in there?
Oh.
Sorry, I don't. I'm just thinking something. But Maggie, did you also have a question or not?
Well, I was just going to say what Simon had said, that if it was the scrutiny committee that was actually doing it with the wording that Joel put into it, it would go to full council at the next report section and be part of that, the full council's reports. So couldn't it bypass the cabinet because it's a scrutiny committee item, and the results would go through to full council?
Simon Hill.
Just to respond, the reason that full council is involved in this process is that your review suggests changes to your own procedure rules and also to changes to the terms of reference to this and what would the council's policy working group or, of the cabinet. Though that is the only reason it's been referred to council, having yet to see the detail of what Councillor Charles is suggesting to officers as the changes that are required to the protocol, I can't really comment on about whether the cabinet would then want to see that protocol again to agree it again. But I think there is a sort of a loop to go round there if that's what members want to do.
Right. What I'm thinking would be in terms of going forward, I think we're all agreed that we want to be able at times, so there may well be times that need urgent action, for want of a better word, being undertaken by officers, etc. And we as a committee want at that point to be able to say, and we want that urgent action to be undertaken within certain, within a truncated period, and for us to be able to say this is what we expect. We expect a response by such and such a time. The question then is, does that, and Joel's suggesting that goes in as want a better word, a bullet, so it'll be like 4.4, some statement in this 4.4. Yeah. I suppose what the issue now is, okay, there needs to be an agreement about what, I think we're all agreed in principle that would be a reasonable thing to do. The question is about some wording to go, and some suggested wording to go in there that we can either take to this coming council meeting, which is coming up on Thursday, or failing that, to a further council meeting, just to be noted to us. But there may well be some work to be done with officers first around what would be a reasonable, if one's going to be putting in timeframes and things like that in there, then there would need to be some work done with officers to agree what would be reasonable. I've got both Simons. Yeah, and I want you to be critical, friends, and suggest a way forward. Simon Carter.
Yeah, we're getting ourselves into a sort of catch-22 loop now. We're all happy for the constitution to go ahead, but we also want to make sure there is something in writing that the Joel's amendment will actually be actioned. Yeah. Now, we could possibly wait till 12 hours while we think overnight what that amendment could be, and then we'll get that into the minutes tomorrow, firming it up, or we can let it go through as it is, and then make a recommendation to the next meeting scrutiny. But I think Mr. Hill has his hand up.
Chair, can I make a suggestion that you add a recommendation such that you ask the working party that was set up to look at it originally to go back and look at how items can be fast-tracked and reflected in the protocol, but you otherwise agree what the recommendations are, you just add another one and ask the working group to go back. That way that the process can proceed through to full council, we can get on with the programming and the work plan that members want to, and we can have a report back from the working party that was set up before and come back to the next meeting with any proposals, and that Councillor Charles will undertake to let us have what he foresees as what's required, and we can look at that again. Quite happy to do that. Is that a suggestion that the committee would be willing to follow?
Sorry, can I? Simon's made his version of events here, but just to be clear on where I stand on this, I'd be very happy to just put together my own views on how this fast track mechanism works, and then hand it over to you, because it's only appropriate, Chair, that you take the lead on it.
Yeah.
Because you understand the will of the majority of the committee. It's not for me.
Yeah.
I'm not the chair. I will submit to you, Tony, my thoughts on how this works out, and it's only appropriate that the chair of this committee then deals with it in line with the work. I'm happy with the working group. I think that's entirely appropriate, but I think it's only appropriate that I send that directly to you as the chair, who understands the majority view, and then it's actioned in the way you deem it to be appropriate.
And just so you're clear, Joel, what I will probably do with it, I've got Simon before I answer that. Simon, do you want to come in? Simon Carter.
Yeah, I'm sort of focusing on trying to move things through and yet provide a full audit trail.
Yeah.
We could have an amendment along the lines that any further recommendations are made to the chairman to take forward. So we'll keep it short and simple like that, as an amendment to the main recommendation.
Okay.
If the committee is happy.
People agree with that. I will then tell you what I will do with it once it's come to me. What is I will then do with it? I will then ensure that both Bob and David have sight of that. We'll have some discussion, and then on the basis of that we will then go forward from there. I'm
happy.
So that completes the loop. Effectively, it goes back to the small working group, and then we then take it forward from there with the officers. Okay, everybody happy with that? Ray. Right. Thank you very much.
Right. So you're happy
Simon,
with the wording of the
Carter.
amendment?
You're muted, Simon.
You're happy with the wording of the amendment?
I'm happy with the wording of
that any further amendments are referred to you.
Yes.
Take forward for the next meeting.
To take forward for the next meeting, and the next meeting will be in September. Yeah. So
that is an amendment to the recommendations that we've got. It documents the fact that amendments will be coming forward. We haven't quite worked out what they are yet, but they will be coming forward for the next meeting. So it is documented, and everybody knows it's going to happen. So there's no surprises in September.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that seconded, Chair, by, I'm assuming, Councillor Charles or Councillor Johnson?
Yeah, agreed.
Everybody else okay? Happy with that? Yeah.
So the committee are otherwise approving the recommendations, are they, Chair?
Yeah. Okay. Right. Let's go back to the work plan. And I apologise that you haven't got, again, not necessarily, we've got these in front of you. Now, just to remind ourselves, I've just got to find, can I just get my bits of paper together if I may? Right. On the scrutiny work plan going forward, there was originally review of the impact of permitted development, review of policing in the town, review of youth club provision, and review of adult social care, transport links in and out of Harlow, review of overview and scrutiny, which we just dealt with. In addition to that, we also had Maggie raised the question of the impact of COVID, in particular on youth services and on domestic abuse. David, on behalf of the Conservative group, was particularly concerned around housing, and an update on the planned council developments. And myself and David are also interested in health inequality across the town. And in particular, we were interested in possibly concentrating on issues around, for example, obesity, prevention of type 2 diabetes. Those were what could or couldn't be done about that. Now, what I was going to suggest is and we will agree this at the next meeting. But what I was going to suggest that in terms of the review of adult social care, I would anticipate that being that would not be done in the short term. It's much more a long term, you know. I'm also aware of the work that's going to be picked up as far as the new the COVID recovery group, and there may well be some things within here that will be picked up and actioned by the COVID recovery group. So what we want to try and do is avoid any sort of duplication of work. There may well be times then, how can I put it, although they're the same subject, there may well be different emphases. So for example, scrutiny might well want to look at something in a particular way and is wanting to follow through on particular items, whereas the COVID recovery panel may well have a slightly different focus on what have you. So I'm not saying that because it's gone to COVID recovery, subject's gone to COVID recovery, it therefore necessarily excludes scrutiny from it. But as a scrutiny committee, we need to bear in mind whatever else is being dealt with in the other, you know, in other venues. We also need to very much bear in mind the availability of etc. of the time. So just going back, so in terms of the review of the adult social care, and that was what I think I put on, and I was very much wanting to sort of see, well, what are the particular issues? Are there better ways that we as an agency, that the council can work with? What are the issues for us and what are the issues for social services? But I think at some point, as I say, the urgency of that can possibly be postponed. In terms of the review of policing, we had a meeting with the police about a year ago now, maybe I forget the exact time, say about approximately a year ago, and we had intended to invite them back, and then COVID got in the way, and at that point I thought, well, when they were due to come back, if I remember rightly, around about either February or March time, if I remember rightly, and I thought at that point, no, let's not, you know, they've got enough on their plate without us calling them back in at that particular time. On the other hand, I'm picking up on the point that Joel was making earlier on, there may well be issues that at some point that we do want to have a discussion with the police on, and particularly about our role as an agency and their role as an agency and what's being done, etc., etc. But again, I would see that towards the end of the end of the year rather than immediately, unless other people had another views. As far as the review of youth club provision, and as far as the review of the youth club provision, I think that we need some work, Maggie, done on saying, well, okay, what do we want to do in terms of being smart? What is it we want to get out of that review? And equally, the same goes as far as any review is with regard to domestic violence. You know, what is it we're wanting to seek to achieve? So in terms of, so when we come back on in September, we can say, well, where do we want to do them? But I would say before that, you need to be giving some thought to, you know, how you turn those into smart objectives. And the officers are quite willing to help out, you know, help us with that. In terms of transport links in and out of Harlow, that was something that was put on way back in 2016, from what I can gather, well before my, you know, or I had anything to do with the committee or even on the council and what have you. it then doesn't appear to have been around for some time. I suppose the question for me is, does it still need to be on there? And if it does need to be on there, what do we want to, what do we want to be doing with it? And we need to give some thought to that. So I'm not suggesting it's taken off, but I am suggesting that perhaps we need to give some more, some more thought to what is it we're seeking to achieve on that one. In terms of housing, now housing is down, or certainly housing strategy is down as an item on the cabinet overview working group, which will be renamed cabinet, it's called now policy committee, whatever it is. And there's certainly been a suggestion, and Tony Durkin's more than willing to come and meet with members and have a discussion about where things have got to. Sorry, Simon. Yeah. But there was a suggestion that it could possibly go there to the cabinet overview working group for them to look at. Simon Carter, that is.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. If you're referring to the item that came through David a few weeks ago, the purpose of that scrutiny is on housing delivery.
Right.
Where are we with council house building?
Yeah.
It doesn't fit in with strategy at all. It's a standalone item. I'm more than happy to sit down tomorrow and draw out the topic submission form in order to bring out the points.
Well, I think that may well be useful, and for us then to have we'll then go back and then have a discussion with portfolio holders, etc., about where that appropriately comes. Okay. Yeah. So that's the thinking, for now, as it were. David. You muted, David.
I'm unmuted. Yeah, you can hear me now.
Yeah.
Right. I haven't said a lot up to yet, but the work plan we did discuss, or the agenda we did discuss a few weeks ago, and I wrote out to my group about some of the things that they were interested in, as the chairman did also.
Yeah.
These things were brought up at the meeting, and we did have a report back from Adam about the meeting, and most of the things that Tony has just talked about were on the agenda. However, when I got the agenda, most of these things were not on the agenda.
Yeah.
Tony spoke to me about this and said some of these things were taken off by officers and replaced by other bits and pieces. I don't agree with that. I think that was a bad mistake. Not to do with Tony. I'm protecting Tony here because I know he's got hearts in the right place. I think these things should have been on the agenda. And if officers wanted to intervene and tell us why it can't be done or it should be taken off the agenda, I'm perfectly happy with that. But not to have them on the agenda in the first place seems to me like officers are running the scrutiny committee. And I'm very upset about that. And I'm in full support of Councillor Edwards. He was in a very difficult position at the time. We've spoken about it since, and as you just heard, he's put these items up for the work plan. Now, the work plan itself was never discussed by Councillor Edwards and myself because I certainly thought that it was an automatic entry on the agenda. That's what I'm prepared to say at this moment in time. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So, but in terms of, sorry, I've got Bob. He's got his hand up.
Yes, Chair. You've mentioned all these subjects. When are we going to actually set times to them and when they're going to be done? That's what I'd like to know. Are we going to agree them at the next meeting?
Yeah.
There's lots of stuff there we need to go through. We need to start some work on them. And I'm worried that we're going to wait a long time before they get work done on them again.
Yeah. Yes, they'll be done. They'll be done at the next meeting. The agenda will be set. Sorry, the timetable will be set at the next meeting. But what I am saying, though, is in the interim, in terms of if people have got particular interests about any of these subjects and what have you, some work needs to be done about turning interest into what would be considered to be smart objectives. So I'm back to yourselves in terms of that. Sorry, David, I've got.
Yeah, what I was going to say there was one of the things we should take into account before we put these things on the work plan is we do not want to duplicate anything that the recovery work team is going to do. So let's try and find out what they're involved in. And if they're involved in any of the things that we've suggested, let's deal with that and get on with the things that they're not going to be dealing with.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that will only become clear as of this week, next week, a couple of weeks' time when the recovery plan. I've got Joel. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, the first recovery working group formally sits next week. And I agree with Councillor Carter, David Carter, on this. This is exactly why we discussed what we did in the protocol, because there may be things that cross over with the working group on recovery that Scrutiny want to look at in a fast-tracked fashion. That means the protocol that we've agreed in principle we want to put together is there to look at those, because we have just gone through unprecedented times, and that means officers are going to have to think differently and be more agile.
Okay. Anybody else? I've got Councillor Simon Carter. Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. Just a quick technical question. Can I ask Adam to send me a Word version of the topic submission form, please, so I can fill it in?
Okay.
I'm intending on sending it around tomorrow as a Word form for all of you. And
Thank you.
In fact, as all councillors can submit a topic under the new system, provided they're supported by one of the councillors of the committee.
Right. Well, unless is there any other comments that people want to make? Otherwise, I think I'm wanting to draw this to an end. Now, draw this meeting to an end. Nope. Well, thank you for your thank you for today, and I think it's been a helpful discussion, and it's certainly, I know as chair, I've learned one or two things going forward. So I look forward to the next meeting, and we'll have the discussion. And I know some of you are on the COVID recovery panel, and I'm on the COVID recovery panel, and hopefully between us we can work out what it is that needs to come back to this working group with officers and what have you, and what will be being picked up elsewhere. Okay. But thanks ever so much for your time and today, and I look forward to the next meeting. And before I finish, can I just thank both David and Bob in particular for the work that they did together with the officers on this, on the review of the overview and scrutiny report, and particularly there was a fair bit of work that went on there. So thank you very much. Take care, everybody.
Well done, everyone. Thanks. Bye.